So hi everyone. My research paper was about the creator economy and more specifically with Web3, how might the future look like? This is the agenda for today. I will spend some time walking through the definition of the creator economy, the pain points currently in the industry. Then I will spend more time discussing how Web3 might provide solutions to tackle some of the pain points, as well as the challenges faced by these solutions. And lastly, I have a couple of ideas on how the future might look like for the creator economy. So firstly, just to quickly give the definition, the creator economy is about ecosystem serving all the online content creators, from vloggers to influencers to writers. There are currently 50 million people who identify themselves as creators online, and the market is about 100 billion size this year. What was interesting is that the creator economy was emerged to decentralize traditional media, which was centralized and run by a small number of big companies because of high barriers to entry. And now with the barriers to entry lowered significantly by smartphones, software tools, and the prevalence of internet, the creator economy really liberalized the media. However, as the creator economy grows and matures, itself has become monopolistic and dominated by a few large players, and that created some of the pain points faced by the different constituencies in the industry. So when we look at the chart here, the platforms are in the central. They are connecting the creators and the users, and they are dominated, as I talked about, by a few large big tech players who have this monopolistic power as well as a profit-seeking behavior. And for the creators on the left-hand side, they have some problems such as unfair or sometimes untransparent revenue sharing models. For some platforms, such as TikTok, they do not share any of their ads revenue with their creators, for example. And there is also a large disparity in the wealth distribution among the creators. And lastly, there is also a fear of platform censorship because the platform can just block your accounts or your and you can lose your content and followers on that platform. On the other hand, for the users, there's been a worsened user experience because of increased ads. I'm sure everyone has been experiencing it. And there's also some misinformation, especially to the vulnerable communities. And lastly, the security and data privacy, which we just talked about. And at the bottom, the other group, which are sometimes ignored, are actually the employees who work for these platforms. They work long hours, they earn wages, but they are laid off during economic downturns like now. And this is because the current system only rewards more capital than labor participation. And with all these pain points facing the current creator economy, how can Web3 provide some solutions to address this? So first, on the definition of Web3, the main idea about Web3 is enabling ownership through decentralization and aligning the interests of different participants in the ecosystem. When we talk about Web3, there are many different definitions, but broadly it's about the next iteration of the World Wide Web, which is characterized by ownership and decentralization. And these decentralized protocols or applications can still function as intermediary, but they are not owned or controlled by any centralized entities like a big tech company. Instead, they can be owned collectively by developers, investors, creators, users, or other community members via owning the protocol's tokens. And in this way, the different stakeholders can participate as shareholders of one application, and their interests and incentives could be aligned. I know this sounds a bit technical or a bit vague, so I'll try to illustrate using some examples. Oh, before that, I wanted to talk a little bit about the technical side without going into too much of the details. As I said, the key word about Web3 is decentralization, and the decentralized nature is powered by a stack of technology that is different from Web2. So for Web2 on the left-hand side, for each app, its data is content in the app's own ecosystem. So users, for example, interact with Instagram, and users' data are kept on Instagram's centralized data storage. And for another app, say TikTok, that's on TikTok's centralized data storage. So for Web2, the flow of data is very vertical within each app's own ecosystem. However, on Web3, on the other hand, there are different layers. At the bottom, there is this data infrastructure layer, which enables decentralized storage, and there are different providers for that. On the central layer, there's what we are more familiar with, like the blockchains, different blockchains or different protocols. Ethereum is one example that more people are more familiar. And on the top layer, there are the different content applications that interact directly with users that are the equivalent of Instagram or TikTok in the Web3. So in the Web3 world, data is based on composability, and the data flows more like a network. So for example, the application on the top sound, it can be built on any of the blockchain on the blockchain layer, whose data could be stored decentralized in any of the data infrastructures. So it's really a network flow of data and technology. And just to illustrate with a case study or example, there is an application called Miro.xyz. It's similar to Substack. If any of you are familiar with that, it's a decentralized publishing platform, one of the top applications in Web3. But it has several advantages as compared to the Web3 platform. For the creators, number one, it's permissionless content publishing. Everyone can go there and publish. The data storage is permanent and decentralized, so you won't worry, the creators won't worry that the platform might just erase the data. And number three is proof of ownership, as the creators can mint their content into an NFT asset, which can be tracked then on the blockchain. And lastly, it's a subscription-based model, but creators return 100% of all the payment from the subscribers. So that's a benefit for the creators. Then for the consumers, number one, the enhanced user experience because there's no ads, for example. And number two, subscription is wallet-based and not identity-based, which means the platform or no one else would know who you are, because you just need a cold wallet, which everyone can get to subscribe to the service. And this prevents many problems such as privacy or identity theft. And for other community members, they can collectively own the platform via owning the token. And then this token can be acquired or bought in the open market, or they can be acquired by contributing to the community, for example, by maintaining the service, by updating the code, and many other ways of contribution. So this is an example of a very early stage, still decentralized app that demonstrates some of the advantages for Web3. But Web3 is still in a very early stage, and many challenges are there. So for the creator economy itself, many challenges are there to build a successful and sustainable ecosystem. We know for creator economy, the three most important factors is the content, the user base, and the business model. For content, Web3 still lacks quality content because the top creators who are earning a lot are less incentivized to explore or join a new Web3 platform. And then for the user base, the current onboarding experience is still persists high barriers to entry. People may not be aware of how to, for example, open a wallet and subscribe using a wallet. And the traditional means for user acquisition are very costly for Web3 applications. And on the business model side, different kinds of projects are still working to trying to figure out a sustainable revenue and economic model to reward, incentivize, and align community members. So still a lot of things to be done. Then on the technology side, there are still also many challenges. So there's one thing called the famous blockchain trilemma, which means that it's not possible to optimize for all three of the characteristics of the triangle: scalability, security, decentralization. But these are all desirable attributes. So this is something different developers and programmers are trying to solve at the technology infrastructure level. Yeah, so we talk about all the benefits and all the challenges. So what might the future look like? In my view, there are two ideas that really excite me. Number one, I think Web3 might just become an additional channel in the whole creator ecosystem, and they will supplement the existing channels, but the existing channels might also adopt some of the Web3 features. For example, Instagram, Facebook are already supporting NFTs, and users can leverage Web3 platforms as an additional source of revenue, but also a diversified channel to protect themselves if they are worried about risks related to centralization. And the Web3 platforms can cater to many special needs. For example, people can protect their identity using decentralized identity, but still enjoy the credibility in social networking without disclosing their real identity. So that's one of the ideas. The second idea is that I believe the boundary between creators and consumers will further blur, and community creation will become the new way of production. And this is because the demand for content to interact with audience is growing, and everyone now could easily become a creator because the permissionless nature of Web3 and because of the improvement in technology. We talk a lot about AI-generated content, right? So everyone is empowered by the technology and by the permissionless nature to create and become a value creator. Lastly, there is this CC0 approach. For people who are not familiar, CC0 means it's a creative common license, which essentially means the creator waive all of their intellectual property rights of their work, so allowing the public to reuse their work to modify, distribute, or sell. And this approach is in line with the decentralization spirit and is gaining a lot of support, at least in the Web3 world and sometimes in the Web2 world as well. So I believe with the CC0 approach, with generative AI, the boundary between creators, consumers will really become blurred, and community creation might become the new way. Yeah, and that's all.
So so there are a couple things in this. This reminds me a little bit of, the early sort of, the early dark web, right? Is this really going to be primarily a marketplace for people to do bad things and share bad content, non-social content? So that's one question. The second question is, you talked a little bit about generative AI. Would this be a way to shield creators and their content from being used in the broader generative AI models?
I think so. That's I think to answer both of the questions, it's always a risk in Web3 when people hide their identity, right? It's something like money laundering, right? You want to track it down. So I think regulators are working on that as well, and different platforms or different protocols are also trying to enforce whether on intellectual property rights or whether on identity issues. But I think now there is no clear solution or answer to how that can be done, because it's still to be honest, like an anonymous world where everyone can do everything, and it's more about like everyone act as a police themselves, rely a lot on the community instead of centralized body, because it's a decentralized world. Yeah.
Let's have a question about the research you've done, but more so about your experience, your personal experience using Web3 in different content creation applications. Have you created content on Web3, and what's been your experience?
Well, I have not really created. I mean, I've created, but I have not published anything in Web3. But I've been following a lot of people, right? And I think what's really, for me personally, what's really funny is that although we interact a lot without disclosing identity, but the highlight is still the what we call IRL, in real life events. For example, I went to Denver for like a Web3 conference in spring break, and people were able to meet offline in real. Yeah, and that feels very different after you have been talking or like just social networking with someone online without knowing who that person is. Yeah, so I guess I feel the in-person experience, in-person touch is still not replaceable by any other experience.
Just a broader question in terms of Web3, given sort of where the economy is. What sort of gives you optimism that sort of the hole that specifically crypto blockchain has had in the last year is we're gonna come out of that in a better way, right? Like the people in the conference that you went to, right? Like, what is sort of the energy as they look into the future? Right? Is this just a small blip, or are there some foundational things that need to change in order to go back to pre-pandemic times?
Yeah, I think. Well, I don't know when it will come out, if ever. But I think it was going back to the conference. It was really eye-blowing to see how people are dedicated, especially the programmer side. Like I'm more the business side, but it's to see how different programmers from around the world, like we have people from Ukraine, for example, went to the conference to discuss their ideas about how they can further improve the tech infrastructure, how they can make it more scalable. It was just very inspiring to see how people are still building in such a bear market. And some startups were not funded, but they have to use their own money. And it's just like, I guess it's the spirit of people that make me believe this is still going on.
I guess related to that question, also very broadly speaking, I think beyond just like kind of the state of the world, what's going on or different systems. Do you see any other adoption challenges for more people to get on to start using Web3 technologies, both creators and then others that might want to?
Yeah. So I think number one is first is it still come back to the user experience, right? Like when we talk about when ChatGPT came out, I think one of the reasons it just went so fast is because it's so easy to understand. Like it's so easy to adopt, right? Like everyone who has used a chatbot before know how to use it. But for Web3 or for crypto, the barriers is still high. Like you have to be educated on what exactly is a crypto, what is a wallet, how do I get a wallet, how do I protect my private keys, and it's a long education process. I think, and when you get that, when you go to those different apps, the user experience are not as smooth as Web 2 yet. They are more like, I don't know, probably like 20 years ago, when you imagine that, yeah. So I think that is still a big part for adoption.
And just a quick follow-up, what would you say is like, if you had to put an estimate to it, what might be a time horizon for when that might get better? Because like you said, like Web2 right now, like user experience is a lot easier, anyone can get on. Whereas it's a little bit harder with Web3, so like how long might that take when it's like more broader adoption, do you think?
I really don't have any idea. Yeah. Any other questions? Thank you.